Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our online Individual Artist Awards workshop for 2020. I hope you've all started your applications. The applications open December 16th and will be open until March 2nd. My name is Sharity Sommer. I am a program officer here at the foundation, and I've been co-managing the program for, this is my third year, along with my colleague, who I will let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Enzina Marrari. Like Sharity mentioned, I co-manage the program. I joined the foundation about a year ago. I'm also a previous award recipient prior to my time at the foundation. So I'm really excited to be able to work on the program, having the perspective of an artist who's received the award and now working for the foundation administering the program. We do want to do a sound check real quick before we move on. There is, on the bottom of your screens, you should see an icon that says participants. If you open that, it will give you an option to click yes or no. It should pull up a box to the right of your screen that has a listing of participants. On the bottom of that, there should be a check mark for yes and a check mark for no. If you can hear us okay, please click yes. Fantastic. We also want to encourage you to use the chat function. There is another icon on the bottom of your screen that has a chat box. We encourage you to use this to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we'll address those questions at the end. Before we get started, we also want to introduce our colleague, Nicholas Conrad, who is here with us today to help us with any tech issues we have.
Good afternoon.
And we also wanted to mention Karen Lowell, who will be doing some contract support for us this year, providing any technical assistance or application assistance or answering any questions you may have. She can be reached at arts@rasmussen.org. Unfortunately, she's not here to join us this evening.
And this workshop will take about 2 hours, and tomorrow it will be available on our website, rasmussen.org. And again, you can write your questions down in the chat box or reserve your question until the end, where we'll take off the mute button. With that, we'll get started.
As Sharity mentioned, this presentation workshop will take about 2 hours. If you can't stay for the whole time, this will be available on the website. We just wanted to briefly go over what we'll be addressing today. We'll talk a little bit about the foundation history, a brief overview of the Individual Artist Awards program. We'll talk about award types, eligibility, and review criteria. And then we're introducing some new components to this presentation this year. We will be doing some more direct workshopping on elements of the application. And we're going to break that down into some narrative exercises, some examples of work samples that are successful and maybe not so successful, do a step-by-step walkthrough of the application, and address some of the other narrative components, such as the artist statement and the resume. And then we'll open it up to a Q&A. So please do continue as we go through this presentation to write your questions in that chat box. There will be a time at the end to ask those questions as well.
Thank you. Okay, a little history about the foundation. It was founded in 1955 by Jenny Olson Rasmussen, along with her son Elmer Rasmussen, in honor of her husband E.A. Rasmussen. They bought the National Bank of Alaska and grew it into the largest bank in this state. And Elmer Rasmussen, on his 90th birthday, gave $40 million to the Rasmussen Foundation in 1999. Along with the Anchorage Museum. So arts and culture has always been a huge component of the foundation's giving. And then with the selling of NBA to Wells Fargo, much of his Elmer's estate went to the foundation. And that's when it grew significantly. I'll show my arrows. This is just an overview of the foundation's granting by project focus. So you can see that arts and culture is just one component. Usually it's about a quarter of our grant making each year. Otherwise, human services, health, recreation are some other focus areas. Okay. Our arts and culture investments are granted through a variety of ways. We partner with national organizations such as United States Artists, which also provides grants directly to individual artists on a national scale. There's been several Alaskans represented within that organization. We also work with the Alaska State Council on the Arts quite a bit, as well as funding arts and culture work through museums and culture centers around the state. So this is an overview of the Harper Arts Touring Fund, which the Alaska State Council on the Arts administers. It's grants to support performance-based work, and it subsidizes travel and freight costs to local governments, tribes, or nonprofits for groups that otherwise probably wouldn't be able to travel to these communities. So it subsidizes the performance costs. And that's run by ASCA, and the contact is Laura Forbes. ASCA also administers some programs in partnership with schools. Arts and education is for an artist to have a short-term residency, usually 2 weeks or more, in a school, working with the students, teachers, and the wider community on specific arts-based projects and augment the school's arts curriculum. Cultural collaborations are either with a school or local organization to bring cultural type projects into a school for youth outside of the school day and year. And those are also administered by ASCA through, and you can contact Laura Forbes for more information. Museums Alaska is a statewide nonprofit. It's a membership organization for museums and cultural centers, and it administers two funds on behalf of the foundation. The Art Acquisition Fund, which provides grants to museums and cultural centers to purchase work by currently practicing Alaskan-based artists. And each museum has their own criteria or way of purchasing work and working with artists. So you work directly with the museum to craft an application to Museums Alaska. And then the Collections Management Fund also provides grants to museums to help manage those permanent collections. And Della Hall is the contact for Museums Alaska.
So we wanted to briefly talk a little bit about the background of the Individual Artist Awards program. The program itself began in 2004 as a comprehensive strategy to support arts and culture in Alaska. The foundation was really interested in what they could do to invest back in the arts and culture community throughout Alaska. And they decided the best way to do this was to give money directly into the hands of artists. And the purpose of the program that was created from that idea was to provide financial support through grants to artists for dedicated time and resources for serious artistic growth and exploration, with the outcome of strengthening Alaska's cultural resources. Since those first awards in 2004, the program has provided over 500 grants to artists representing over 53 communities throughout Alaska. And the foundation honors 3 awards: a Distinguished Artist Award, a Project Award, and a Fellowship. There are 25 project awards, and those are for short-term projects that can be done within a one-year period of time. There are approximately 10 fellowships awarded each year, and 1 Distinguished Artist Award. The foundation recognizes 3 career stages: emerging, mid-career, and mature. New to the awards program this year is eligibility expansion. So historically, the program was only eligible to individual artists, but this year, the foundation is accepting applications from artist groups or collaboratives. And we'll talk a little bit more about what makes an artist group or collaborative a little bit later. The awards support the full range of disciplines. So any art making practice that you might have are recognized in the full range of disciplines. There are 11 that an artist can select from, but within those 11, it's a pretty broad and diverse category of art making. The funding is not intended for scholarly or commercial work. We could talk a little bit more about that. There are often lots of questions around what makes a commercial work, commercial project. So we can talk a little bit more about that later on. And the individual artist awards are not a needs-based grant. The project award and fellowship applications are accepted from mid-December to March 2nd. March 2nd is the deadline. The Distinguished Artist Award nominations are accepted mid-October to mid-December, and the grants are awarded in May. Again, that one-year grant term is applicable for all awards, and that one-year grant period is from June 1st to May 31st. This year, we've also introduced a draft review deadline of February 14th, easy date to remember. It's Valentine's Day. This is an opportunity for you to submit your application early. We will review your application and identify any issues or errors with completeness. If we find an incomplete application that has been submitted early, we have the opportunity to reach out to the artist, reopen the application, and allow them to fix any errors that would otherwise make their application ineligible. It is not a review for content or clarity or understanding of narrative intent. It is solely for the review of completeness and accuracy.
Okay, the Distinguished Artist, as Enzina mentioned, is for a single award each year. The nomination process has closed, but it is for one mature artist of a recognized stature with a history of creative excellence and accomplishment within the state. So they are widely known by their peers in their respective disciplines, and it is the artist is selected by an Alaska-based panel. The nomination closed December 16th for 2020, and for 2021, it will open again in October. The two application award types that we'll be discussing today are project award and fellowships. Project awards are available each year in all career stages, so emerging, mid-career, and mature, and you can find those specific definitions in the guidelines, which are in a few places on our website. On the main page within the application, you'll find our guidelines. It's for a specific short-term project. You must submit a project budget of $7,500, which is the grant award amount. And 25 of those are given annually. For fellowships, it's an unrestricted grant, so you do not have to do a specific project budget, but you do have to have a plan and a description of activities. The only application difference between the two is that the project award requires a budget. It is, for fellowships, is only available for mid-career and mature artists. And this is important if you are moving into that mid-career stage definition, but in terms of the fellowship applicant pool, it is very competitive. There are only 10 awarded each year. And and sometimes we have more applications for fellowships than project awards, even though many more are given project awards. So if you're between emerging and mid-career, your application may not be seen as competitive within the fellowship applicant pool. So it's important to review those definitions. And for the disciplines, they rotate annually. In 2020, we are accepting fellowship applications for media arts, multidiscipline. And multidiscipline is if your work isn't grounded in one discipline, it allows you to select the 2 disciplines that best represent your work. So that could be, if you're a graphic novelist, it could be literary arts and visual arts. The other 20 disciplines are for fellowships are music composition, new genre, presentation, interpretation, and visual arts. And the definitions of those are also in the guidelines. The guidelines are really dense, but I suggest either saving it on your computer or printing out the guidelines as you move through the application.
So again, the foundation and the awards support 11 artistic disciplines, in addition to the 2020 fellowships disciplines that Sharity mentioned. The other disciplines recognized are choreography, crafts, folk and traditional arts, literary arts, and performance art. And again, these 11 disciplines are available in the project award category every year. It's just the fellowships that rotate from year to year. As we mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, we have introduced a new eligibility category this year, and that is groups or collaboratives. Artist groups or collaboratives are now eligible to apply for either a project award or a fellowship. What constitutes a group or collaborative is pretty simple. It is 2 or more individuals working together on a project or in a group and are applying within one application. What's important to note about this is that if someone is applying as part of a group or collaborative, they cannot also apply as an individual. So that artist has to decide which type of application they want to submit. The groups or collaboratives can be ongoing or they can be time limited. So it can be a group that's been practicing together for a decade, or it could be several different artists coming together to work on a time-based project. So it's really open and broad in terms of how that group is identified. A group must submit one application, and in that application, they must list a project director and the project leads. These individuals share ownership of the collaboration and the project and are for these purposes designated as a collaborator. That is important to identify because individuals who take on a lead capacity of that project, if awarded, would be ineligible to receive or apply for another award for 3 years. And that is the same for an individual artist. We recognize the nature of groups and collaboratives vary significantly, and there might be a group that is made of 3 individuals that share equal responsibility. Those would all be considered collaborators. A project director would still have to be designated, but should that group receive an award, those 3 individuals would be ineligible to apply for 3 years. We recognize, though, that a group might be a 60-person choir, and not all of those individuals have a leadership capacity or a director capacity. And so that specific group would again list the leadership in terms of a project director and project leads on the application. Those individuals would be ineligible. Members at large or general participants of that group would not fall under that ineligibility criteria. For example, a costume designer, AV technician that works for a company but is not part of the overall leadership of that group would not fall under that ineligibility. That project director also takes the fiduciary responsibility of the group, which means they sign the contract in addition to the leads, and they receive the check of the award and have the responsibility of dispersing that, however is agreed upon by that group. In addition to the monetary grant award, the foundation really does want to continue supporting arts and culture and supporting artists in their progress of their individual practices. And so the foundation does this in a couple of ways. One is providing professional development. This is an opportunity that is given to Artist Award recipients, and it looks like a day-long or 2 half-day-long workshop that is held in the Anchorage Museum. It's a partnership the foundation has developed over the last couple of years. And this workshop provides the practical business portfolio development side of being an artist. And so it gives applied practical skills of working with museums, working with galleries, the legal issues of being an artist, marketing, residency, finances, working on those kind of narrative elements. It goes more in depth with marketing yourself, the kind of business practice of being an artist. And then the foundation has also partnered with the local nonprofit 49 Writers to pair a writer and an artist to create an artist profile that is shared on the Rasmuson Foundation website and social media, and is sometimes picked up by other publications throughout the state and sometimes across the country. Two important things to keep in mind as you move through your application is the eligibility and the criteria. So the Individual Artist Awards program is an Alaska-based program, and it is only eligible to Alaska residents who are living in Alaska for at least 2 years and remain a resident for the duration of the grant. Applicants have to be 18 years of age or older, currently producing work, and not enrolled in a university arts program or university arts classes. That being said, the project award or fellowship can also not be used to fund university programming. So an example is a student who is working on their bachelor's degree in arts could not receive a project award to fund part of their tuition. Work cannot be of a primarily scholarly research or commercial nature. We understand that there are lots of commercial aspects of being an artist, selling your paintings, for instance, selling a CD of your work, selling a book that you've written. These are commercial aspects of being an artist, but they are not what we are considering as a commercial nature. Commercial nature might be something like a graphic designer working for a local design firm in town that is applying for a project to buy technical equipment that will improve their commercial practice of working for this firm. So something that is outside of your individual arts practice, but is used for more of a business purpose. The criteria is really important to keep in mind as you move through your application. This is the criteria that the panel is given in guiding their review of the application. So what they're looking for is the artistic quality of your work given your experience. Sharity has briefly mentioned how important it is to identify your correct career stage. And this is why that's also important, because the panelists are looking at your work in conjunction with your career stage. They're also looking at your creative accomplishments. These are usually captured in your artist resume, and we'll go through some sample artist resumes later. They're looking at the impact on the applicant's growth this project will have. That's what you use your narrative to identify. And they're looking for the completeness of the application. So if your application is missing an artist statement or has uploaded 2 resumes or has a blank narrative, that's going to be an incomplete application, which can result in your application being ineligible or just not competitive. Okay, so this is kind of the new element that we've introduced. We're breaking this up into a couple of different workshops. sessions. It might be a little challenging to do this via webinar, so just bear with us. The first part of this will be, Sharity will be leading us through a step-by-step walkthrough of the application. If folks have applied in the past, there are some changes to the application this year. So we feel it's really important to go step by step, show you what the application looks like if you are applying online. After that, we're going to do an exercise breaking out the narrative components of the application. We'll give a little bit more instruction when they're there, and then we'll talk about work samples, and we'll also give more instruction when we're there. So we're going to start with an application step-by-step. We also want to let folks know there is a paper application available, but we highly encourage, if you have access and the ability, we highly encourage you to apply online.
Okay, this is just a screenshot of our website, rasmussen.org. And so I'm just going to go through a series of screenshots to show you how to get to different components of the application and through our website. So the easiest way from Rasmussen.org is to click on grants. And then if you've started your application already, you can go to the grants login button. And so once you click on grants and scroll down to the individual artist awards and click on that, it will take you to this project awards and fellowships page. And so on the right-hand side, you can see it says apply for IA and guidelines for IA. And so that'll take you to a PDF version of our guidelines. So I highly suggest you have bookmark that, save that, or print that out so you can have that as you move through your application. This year, the application is open until March 2nd. That is a Monday. If you're applying online, you'll have until 11:59 p.m. I highly suggest you submit well before that. Every year there are a couple applicants who try and click submit at 11:57 or so, and it doesn't actually go through because of the heavy traffic on our online application system. So I would suggest even taking advantage of our draft review deadline of February 14th and getting your application in much sooner. Okay, so if you're a new applicant, you can, once you click apply for IAA, it'll say register, and you click on register, and you can go down a little bit and see individual artist registration, and so that's if you're applying as an individual, and then it says art group and collective, and can apply. The project director can register there if they're applying for, if you're applying for a group or collaborative project. And so once you do that, you can log into our application system, and it'll take you here. And on the left-hand side, it says Start Application. You can also, if you've applied before, looked at your previous closed or previous applications under the Closed tab, and that'll be where you'll find panel comments if panelists provided any feedback for your previous year's application. So once you click on Start Application, it'll bring you to this Instructions tab, and basically this is our guidelines, so you can navigate through different components of our guidelines to make it a little easier for you. The work sample specifications, discipline definitions, career stages, all of that is there. And then on the cover sheet page, you'll fill out your for the project director of a group, they'll fill out this contact information as well as the mailing address. And then this page, the more you fill out, the more it'll create. So you'll click on project award or fellowship, depending on which award type you're applying for. For the career stage, you'll choose the group's career stage here, and then your artistic discipline, And then if you're applying as a group or collaborative, it'll take you to this series of a group name to fill out. If you're a time-limited collaboration, you can create a name for your project there, and then you'll add how many collaborators. So as Enzina mentioned, the project director and project leads are the applicants to the program, and then if an award is received, they are responsible for signing the grant agreement and carrying out the project or fellowship award plan. So for project director and leads, you'll fill out first and last name here, email, phone information, and each of the individual artists' career stage. So this is the description of activities or your plan. So number one, please provide a clear and concise overview of the proposal. We'll be talking more about this, but this is an area that many applicants don't realize how important it is, but it's actually a concise way of giving a brief overview of what you plan to do in your work. So this, if you're, say, a semifinalist, and because we have a multidisciplinary panel process, two discipline-specific panelists will review each application, and then we'll move it forward to possibly the full panel group, and we'll talk more about the panel process sooner. But if you're a semifinalist, the multidisciplinary panel of 13 to 14 panelists we bring up each year to Alaska will see this concise overview of your proposal. So it's a pretty important component, and it's only 100 words. So then there's a series of questions that you'll answer, and if you're part of a group, you'll also answer another question about each person's role within the project or fellowship application. Anything to add, Enzina?
Just kind of echoing the importance of being very clear with your answers, and we'll talk about this when we get to the narrative breakout, but these are panelists who are not familiar with your work. Like Sharity mentioned, there's a new panel every year, and so it's really important to be as clear and concise as you can. Often this application is what the panelists go on. So being really clear and concise and consistent with your responses on how you're shaping the narrative elements is crucial.
Okay. And then you'll also, at the top of this screen, you'll see about the artist, and that's where you'll add your resume and artist statement, which we'll talk about more. And then moving on, you'll see the timeline. And the timeline is also sometimes some applicants don't spend enough time on. And the timeline allows the panelists to assess whether you'll be able to complete your proposed activities within the one-year grant period of June 1st to May 31st. So it's important to spend some time thinking about how you'll utilize your year if you receive the award. It doesn't have to be a week-by-week description of everything, but they need to know that you have spent some time thinking about it. And then for the project awards, the project budget is where you'll list your item descriptions and the cost, and it must equal $7,500. And one important thing here is that a lot of artists include time, which is okay, but I would not suggest time of $7,500 for an entire year, as that would be difficult for a panelist to assess how that will develop your artistic growth. So throughout the panel process, we ask the panelists to go back to assessing whether the application will improve or help an artist continue their growth and development. So spending some time about what will help you grow as an artist, it's important to think about within the project budget. Moving on to work samples. So within the guidelines, there's several different options of work samples that you can choose from. Within literary arts, of course, you'll likely submit a Word document or PDF, but there's also digital images, audio, and video samples, and you have an option to combine work sample, such as adding audio and digital images. But that doesn't mean you should. There's usually a specific reason why you would do that. For example, a instrument maker may have applied under the crafts discipline, and they add digital images as well as an audio sample to demonstrate the sound of the instrument. And it's also important to remember to spend some time on the medium and description of your work. Sometimes this is looked over. And one thing to note about the year, we highly recommend that work samples be from the last 5 years. If you're submitting older work samples, there should be a compelling reason why, and you can include that in the description, as well as in your plan in the application.
For the narrative elements of your application, you will be asked to provide a description of activities. These are those 4 narrative questions that Sharity briefly went over. They're also referred to as your plan. You are asked to upload or write in an artist statement and provide an artist resume. So for the plan, again, those 4 key questions that you'll be asked to answer is to provide a clear and concise overview of the proposal, to discuss what you'll do if you receive the grant award, what is your project or fellowship focus. This is getting to the root of what your project is. How will the proposal advance or enrich your artistic career and development? That's one of those criteria questions. How will this project help you grow? In what ways? And then why is this work important? Some of you who've applied in the past might recognize this as a new question. The previous question was getting around to this, but we feel like this is an opportunity for you to describe the importance of this work to you and to the community and to express your passion. And also to submit a timeline and project award and a project award budget if you are applying for a project award. Again, the word limits are short and brief. You have 100 words for that project overview, which is the first thing the panelists read. It's important to make that a really strong statement because it is the introduction to your work that they are receiving, and it could be the thing that makes them want to set your application aside to come back and revisit. The other word limits are also short. They're 250 words. So it's important to be clear, concise, consistent, and I add a 4th one here, and that's compelling, right? To think about what makes your application unique, what makes it different, what makes your application something the panelist wants to say, I'm interested, I'm intrigued, I want to know more. So what we're going to do now, and this might be a little tricky, we've not done this on a webinar, we want to run through an activity to get to some responses to 2 of those difficult questions. So the first question that we're going to ask all of you to answer on your own is to provide a clear and concise overview of the proposal. So what is an overview of your project? Again, you have 100 words for this. So this is your attention-getting statement. Now we're going to ask you to do this in a couple of ways. One is if you are watching this presentation with other people or with a group of people, to find one person to partner with, or if you're in a group of three, to work as a group. If you're an individual, that's okay. We have an alternative for that. And then you're going to take 5 minutes and you're just going to brainstorm what your answer to that question will be. You're going to brainstorm your project or fellowship concept. Think of this as just a brain dump, a word vomit on the page, getting all of those ideas out, not overthinking it. It's time limited, so you just have to kind of write from the gut. And then after that, we're going to take 5 minutes. If you have a partner or a group that you're with, then you're going to take turns within those 5 minutes reading your proposal out loud to someone and asking them to tell you what they heard you say and to ask if it was clear, concise, consistent, and/or compelling. If you are alone and you have the capability to record yourself, we ask you to read your proposal concept out loud, record it, play it back to yourself, and write down what you heard yourself say, and analyze it for those four C's: clear, concise, consistent, and compelling. So this is a 10-minute exercise. It's very quick. For that second part, if you are with a partner or a group of three or more, you only have about 2.5 minutes each to do this exercise. I'm going to keep time. I will give you warnings when we're about halfway through those 5 minutes. So right now, get a pen and paper out, open up Word if you're on your computers, and just take the next 5 minutes. Again, we'll keep time to provide a clear and concise overview of your proposal. We're going to start time now.
That's
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me. I don't mean to interrupt, but nobody's apparently able to hear you.
Hey, can you hear us now?
I can. There we go. Check the chat to see
Okay,
everyone
great.
looks like
Thank
they can
you.
too. No problem. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Okay, are we back on? Okay, so if everyone can go back to that yes or no. If you can hear us, click yes. Okay, thanks. We'll back up the screen. Okay, perfect. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for your patience. So what we were saying with the artist statement is that you have the option to either upload an artist statement as a separate document, a Word document or PDF, or you can type in the template on the application and answer it as though it was a narrative question. We really recommend that you upload a separate document. It provides more consistency for the panel, and it is the preferred approach. When you think about drafting the artist statement, there are a few questions that you can consider as prompts, and those are what, how, and why. So the what is really getting to the root of your project. What are you doing? What is your art practice? The how is how you're achieving that. How are you doing it? What's your medium? What's your approach? Are you an individual artist, a social practice, civic practice artist? Are you working collaboratively? Is your medium oil painting? Is your medium performance art? Is your medium theater art? How are you achieving the what? And then finally, the why. And this is a really big one. It kind of reflects those narrative questions, but this is more about your art practice as a whole. And that why is the important part. Why is this important to you? Why are you passionate about it? Why should a viewer care? Why should a panelist care? Why is this a significant, important work? And you can start by brainstorming answers to those prompts and adding a few more W's to that conversation. You can also talk about who inspires you, who is working with you, who are you looking to, and the when, right? What is the timeline? Is there a trajectory to your work that you want to address that's important in your statement? And just do that brain dump exercise. So the exercise we did with the narrative questions where you use those W's and the H, the what, how, as prompts, and you just start putting words down. And then once you have those words down, start highlighting, start pulling out the words that really connect to what you are doing conceptually as an artist. And then put those words in order of importance and in order of clarity. And then you can start turning those words and ideas into sentences. And this is where you start to draft your statement altogether. And we really encourage you to get rid of any jargon or any kind of in language. So if you're talking about something that's really specific to your art practice but wouldn't be understood by anyone outside of that, make that a little bit more clear. And we talk about statements to avoid in your artist statement, and that's what we want you to kind of work through when we're talking about getting rid of the jargon. And then we recommend proofreading it, reading it out loud, giving it to someone else, like I mentioned, to read it for those 4 C's, for consistency, being clear, concise, and compelling. Those statements to avoid that we've talked about, and these come from different panelists and jurors across the United States. And these are kind of pitfalls that a lot of artists will fall into in drafting an artist statement, because it can be really difficult to talk about our own work. It's very personal. We understand what we're doing, but it can be really hard to communicate that. And so some of the statements that people have used to describe their work that are recommended to avoid are these that you see. My work is intuitive. I do art because I have to. This doesn't really give the panelists any information about your specific art practice. My work is about the macro and the micro. That, again, is unclear. We don't know what the macro is. We don't know what the micro is. It doesn't get to the roots of your work. My work is about the organic and the synthetic, very similar. My work is a personal journey. Many artists' work is a personal journey, but in that statement, talk about what that journey is. Where have you been as an artist? Where are you going? What are those marks that you're trying to get? My work is about my experiences. Very similar to the journey. What are those experiences? This is an opportunity for you to really dive into the meat and vegetables of what your process is as an artist. I pour my soul into each piece. My art speaks for itself. This we've seen a lot, and again, it's very similar. Most artists are very connected to their work, but this is an opportunity to express your practice to a panelist who might not have any exposure to your work at all. And if you allow just your work to speak for itself, it could be a weakness in not taking the full advantage of how to identify the principles in your work that you want to make sure are understood. And then I've been drawing since I was 3 years old. This doesn't really give a lot of insight into your art practice. If your personal journey is important, if learning a traditional practice since you were a child is important, then identify and flush that out. But just saying I've been making art since I was a child doesn't really give the panel a lot of information. The other document that you'll be asked to either upload or you can answer in a narrative block is your artist resume. And this really ties to another element of the criteria that the panelists are looking for, and that's your artistic accomplishments to date. A resume is basically a comprehensive collection of the work that is relevant to your art practice to date. You may also hear a CV. A CV is kind of like a master list. So a CV will contain everything you have done relevant to your art career. A resume is more of a curated collection of what you've done, In a resume should be included things that are relevant to your art practice. So education as it relates to your art practice, your accomplishments as they relate to your art practice, any trainings, any activities, all that relate to your art practice. If your background is in the culinary arts, but you're a photographer, including your educational training in the culinary arts is not relevant to your art resume. So leave that out separately in a career resume. So this is basically a really loose structure and outline of what should appear on your resume. And it's going to be unique based on your type of art practice. There isn't a standard template that every artist should follow. But what you want to make sure you have included on your resume is contact information, your education or training if it's relevant to your art practice. This could look like degrees from a university art program. It could look like specific training. It could look like apprenticeships or mentorships. It can look like a lot of different things. Exhibitions, if those are part of your practice. They may not be if a part of your practice is commission work or performance work. Residencies, if those are a part of your practice. Awards, grants, or fellowships. Any other heading that is relevant, that takes a significant precedence in your practice as an artist. Maybe that is visiting artist programs, or being a lecturer, or working on commissions or mentorships. And then again, collecting any press that you've received as an artist, any major collections, so anything that would be more prominent, like a museum or a prominent gallery, not casual collections that maybe your auntie Jenny has of your work. And then any related experience, and this is going to be specific to your practice. I also wanted to know that we are getting a lot of questions in the chat, and we will make sure to answer those questions at the end of the presentation. If we're not able to get to those questions, we'll be able to get emails and respond to those questions individually. So this is just a basic structure of an artist's resume. Keep it simple, keep it clear, keep it concise, and keep it consistent. It does not need to be flashy at all. It has a lot of the information that we just went over, and you'll notice in these selected exhibitions that this particular sample has all of the exhibitions lumped together with parenthetical statements identifying if it was a solo exhibition or not. If you are an artist that has lots of solo exhibitions, you might want a header that is just collecting your solo exhibitions and another that has group or curated, etc. We also have these samples of resumes available on our website for you to download as an example. Some of the most common mistakes we see in resumes are really things that go back to inconsistencies, inconsistent use of grammar or spacing or organization or commas. Just keep it clean and clear. The order that things are listed in, you want things to be the most recent items first on your resume and the oldest items towards the bottom. If you're missing contact information, that's a big mistake that is often seen. Another one is implying something has happened if it hasn't yet. For instance, if you have an exhibition scheduled for December of this year, and you include it in your resume as though it has already happened. What's better to do is to write next to it or in parentheses, upcoming, forthcoming, expected, anticipated. You just want to present your authentic self in your application as a whole, but also in your achievements. And then missing any geographical data. For instance, if you have an exhibition in Portland and you include Portland, it may be Portland, Maine, it may be Portland, Oregon, just making sure that you're clear and consistent and providing the most accurate data that you can. Something else we want to touch on briefly as you think about your project and your proposal is the idea of cultural appropriation. And this is something that we see throughout our state. And we just want to talk a little bit about the difference between cultural appropriation and creative collaboration or responsible cultural exchange. And cultural appropriation is defined as the unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption of customs, practices, ideas of one people or society by members of another that is more typically dominant. And this presents a particular power dynamic in which members of a dominant culture take elements from a culture of people who have been systematically oppressed by that dominant group. And often this results in benefit to that dominant group. What this might look like in terms of an artistic application could be an artist that is not rooted in any tradition or culture, but sees a Northwest form line design, appreciates it, takes an image of it, uses that as the background of their painting, paints over it, claims it as their own, and then benefits from the use of that image without any permission or understanding of the cultural significance of that work. Conversely, cultural exchange or responsible creative collaboration has the following elements present: free, prior, and informed consent of all parties, shared control over the process and the product, acknowledgement and attribution, respect for cultural differences, and reciprocity and benefit sharing. We have a quick flow chart we won't spend time on, but you can go into this further if you once we have this presentation also available on our website. And it's really asking the question, is this part of my culture? And that's where you can get to the root of, is this appropriative or is this creative exchange and responsible cultural collaboration? Okay, so we are going to move through the work sample part of the presentation. And I will turn it over to Sharity.
Okay, so as I briefly mentioned, there's a number of different options that you're allowed in submitting various work samples. We'll go through some tips of each type. So for digital images, it's important to create in documenting your work that it has the lighting, it's represented in a way that is visible, because a lot of times, sometimes the pixels aren't enough and it can get blurry to the panel. So all of the panel review of the applications is done completely online, and within the panel review process during our in-person meeting, the photos are often blown up onto a huge screen. So it's important to think and spend some time documenting your work. So some do choose to hire a professional. That's not necessary, but it is important to create quality work samples. So photos presenting the work on a neutral background, white, black, or gray, depending on the image or your work sample itself. Proper exposure, so enough lighting, as I mentioned, to get the details and the colors and textures of your work correctly. So in terms of lighting, it's important to not create hot spots of intense light, which is usually done with a flash or dark corners or shiny patches or glare. And cropping the image, making sure it fills the camera frame, and make sure, and we'll go through a series of images to make this a little more clear. And you can take multiple images of a work sample, but those do have to be separate images. So for digital images, you're allowed up to 10 work samples. If it's a large work sample, you could take one that's showing the entire work sample, and then you can do a close-up, and that's 2 work samples of the 10 allowed. Okay, video and audio. It's important, since this is a lot of performance-based work, it might be a good idea to hire a videographer, a cinematographer, since these are sometimes time limited, and this will be the only documentation of your work long term. So make sure the images are in focus and edits are clean, and the important aspects of the work fill the screen. Make sure the audio is strong, and make sure there's distracting images taken out. So like in terms of a theater production, make sure the audience isn't a part of the image, or there isn't like a pole in the middle of the screen.
Yeah, and this is where working with a professional is really helpful. They're going to know how to achieve all of these different elements in making a good video. And I want to echo the feedback Sharity was giving about audio. The sound quality of samples is really crucial, and it's often something that is not as good as it could be. For performative work or audio work, those are really the things you have to go by.
And last, cueing and editing is important. You don't want to make a panelist wait 20 seconds before it actually sees any of the work sample. So making sure, and a panelist is only required to review 10 minutes total of all your work samples. So if they have to wait to actually see a work sample, that is a huge disadvantage. Okay, and this image is to represent, to make sure when you're submitting audio or video that you upload separate separate samples for each. So you're allowed 3 work samples for a video and audio, and or if you're doing a combined work sample, you're allowed up to 5 minutes or 5 images. Some applicants mistakenly add 1 work sample that is a mashup of all 3 work samples that they're submitting, and that becomes really difficult for the panelists when they want to go back to a specific work sample and they have to find the specific minute that starts. So upload each work sample separately. So written works for literary arts, you're allowed up to 15 pages if that is the only type of work sample you're utilizing. If it's a combined work sample, I believe it's 7 pages. Again, each of the work sample specifications are in the guidelines. For poetry, you're allowed 4 to 8 total poems. In thinking about your written work sample, proofread and proofread again for typos and spelling errors. Read the document out loud. Make sure you turn off the track changes. Sometimes a document is uploaded too quickly and you upload it with track changes. To avoid that, you might want to convert your Word document to a PDF. So follow the guidelines, the 1-inch margins, the font type. It's really important to have a consistent type of font and size for the panel because they are reviewing a huge amount of written works if they're literary arts panelists. And choose your excerpts carefully. We do recommend if you're submitting a chapter of your book or manuscript, the first chapter is likely what you should select. If you do submit the middle of a manuscript, a description of why an opening description is important to include. But the work sample really should stand on its own and shouldn't require additional explanation. Okay, so now we're going to go through a series of digital images, and so this is where you can use the yes/no function again. If it's good, you can click the yes button. If it's bad, you can click no, and then we'll discuss why each is good or bad.
And we're looking at just the work sample, not the content of the work itself. So has this work sample been captured well? Not the quality of the work is bad. Okay, good or bad? Okay, so we have some responses here for bad. Yeah, so that's correct. This would be a not strong work sample. The reason is there are multiple images, multiple samples in one frame. It looks like it's sketch work. There are those spirally edges left on the pages. It doesn't look professionally finished. So this would not be a good quality or good sample.
And is this good or bad? Oh, can I clear that? Okay. Okay, so I see some yeses. And that is correct. So this would be a quality work sample. It shows the detail. It's not the entire work sample, but this would be an instance where you might want to show the detail of a work.
Good or bad? We have a few votes coming in. Yeah, most folks are leaning towards bad. So this work sample can be confusing because we don't know if the work is finished, it's still on the easel, it's visually distracting, we see lots of images around it. This is a sample of a work sample that wouldn't be successful.
Good or bad? Okay, so I see several goods, and you all are correct. So this is an installation work, and it's a great image of showing depth and perception. And it's a high-quality image.
It shows the use of the space in the work and really draws the viewer in. It's clear, there's not much distraction. Good. Oops. Good or not so good? Okay, we see some votes shifting. Yeah, this wouldn't be a strong work sample because there is more than the work sample in the frame. This would be an example of when cropping to the image itself would be helpful. It's a little unclear. Are we looking at this image? Is it part of is it part of an installation? Is it part of a grouping? Keeping the focus on the work itself. What about this one? Good or not so good? Yeah, we see those no's coming in. Yeah, so this one would be a not so good image. It looks like maybe it was taken with an iPhone, and there is a lot of ways to get good quality on iPhones if you're not working from a camera, but it can skew the perspective and the angle of the image. The lighting seems a little bit off, and it does seem a little, the image itself seems a little off.
Mm-hmm. And so it looks like if it was taken with an iPhone, that the iPhone was probably tilted a little bit. Mm-hmm. And it could also benefit from some cropping. Okay, good or bad? Okay, so no's coming in, or bad, I guess.
Not so good.
Not so good would be the correct term, and that is correct. So it's really confusing on what the actual work sample is. Is it all of the images within installation, and nothing is really clear? You can't see any detail. Okay.
Good or not so good? Yeah, so we see some votes coming in here. This would be a good image, and this is artist Robert Lamontagne, who actually was an award recipient last year. And this goes back to what Sharity was mentioning about the background being neutral, a white, a gray, a black, keeping that background clear so the focus is on the work itself. This is a three-dimensional work. The angle that the photograph has been taken shows the dimension of the work. It doesn't flatten it. And it really is evenly lit with some elements of reflection that highlight the different material used. Good or not so good? Okay, some seems a little half and half. So this would be a not so good image. Sharity had mentioned Showing combined work samples in one work sample is not great. Here we don't know what we're looking at. We don't know if this is a collage of multiple work samples or multiple works, or if these are different work samples that the artist is trying to get into one sample. So instead of 10 samples of their work, they actually have 16 or 26 samples. This would not be an acceptable work sample.
Good or bad? Okay, so several goods, and you are correct. It is, it's a strong work sample. It's only of the actual work sample. Nothing else is distracting from it. The lighting is good. There isn't any type of glare or
Pretty direct. You know, we get questions a lot about frames. Should a frame or mount be included, especially for visual work? Unless that frame or mount is part of the piece, focus that image on the work itself, because then the frame can be distracting. Good or not so good? Yeah, we have some goods coming in. So this is a good work sample. It could be better. It's good because it shows when it's appropriate to use the physical space the work is in. It could have been taken from a different angle to see more of the installation, but the physical location of this space was important for the display of that work. And so this is a good work sample in showing how you can appropriately use space and a physical location in your work.
how about this one? Good or bad? Okay, lots of bads. Yeah, so this is pretty distracting that it's on the floor. It's also looks like it could have been mounted and maybe the frame taken out. The background is pretty distracting overall.
How about this one? Good or not so good? So this one can be tricky, right? Because the work itself could be strong, but it's taken as a selfie. We're not sure what the work is here. Is it the artist and the work? Is it just the work itself? It becomes distracting and the panel's focus and attention is shifted from the work to more of what is in the frame of the photo. So cropping this to just include the painting would have made this a successful image.
Okay, good or bad? And this is also going back to the background. Is it part of the work sample or not? That's unclear. So cropping the image is important to create clarity.
Good or not so good? Yeah, so this is what happens when you upload an image that is too small and when it's blown up on a full screen. And the panelists, when they're reviewing we'll go into the panel process momentarily, their initial review is on their home computers. When they come to Anchorage and are in a group, they're blowing up these images on a full screen. If the resolution is poor, if it's a small work sample and it's blown up, it will appear pixelated, it will appear blurry, and it will be a detriment to your application. So that's why it's really important to follow the size guidelines for the work samples.
As well as reviewing your application and opening the work samples again to make sure everything works, everything is right side up.
Mm-hmm. What about this one? Good or not so good? Ooh, okay. So we've got some oscillating votes. This is a good work sample. This is by artist Susan Joy Scher, who is also an award recipient in the past. This is an example of when that kind of blurriness in an image and the use of the figure when it's not part of the work is okay to do. This, Susan is a book artist and visual performance artist, and movement is important to her work. Movement is important to this piece. So this image demonstrates the functionality of this work and demonstrates the importance of movement. So using an image that has some blur here works. What about this one? So this is another example where the use of the body or the figure is okay to do in a work sample. This is a performative work. It requires a body to be completed as a work. And so showing it on the human form is actually okay, and this makes this a strong image. If this piece was just on a wall, it wouldn't translate the overall concept of the work. So this is an example where using the body or using the artist is okay because of the performative nature of this work. All right, and then we just wanted to show this shot. This is provided to us by Karen Lowell, who is, again, working with us as a consultant this year, is a previous award recipient. She gave us this photo because she wanted us to show the difference between taking a photo with your iPhone and working with a professional photographer. The photo on the left is one she took with her iPhone. She felt like it was a strong image. She used this image when applying for opportunities. And then she had the work photographed by a local photographer. This was done by Hal Gage. And she was shocked at the difference of how the image was captured when working with a professional photographer when she had thought she had captured a strong image on her own.
Okay, so this comes to our last tab in the online application. So it's finalize and submit, so review that entire section, especially for the project director and project leads. If you're applying as a group and collaborative, you are submitting the application together. So the view PDF will allow you to see the entire application in its entirety, print that out and save it, and then save draft and submit application, and you should get an automated email. So moving quickly through the panel process. The project award and fellowships are decided by an outside lower 48-based panel, so they are non-Alaskans. And it's a multidisciplinary panel. It's two discipline specific panelists review each application, and then a multidisciplinary panel then selects all 25 project awards and 10 fellowships. And the panel changes each year. Again, the panel, we give this information, the criteria to the panel, and we remind them of the criteria as they go through the process to ensure that they're awarding recipients based on our application criteria. These are just some comments from panelists. We will be uploading this presentation online, so we aren't going to go through each specific slide, but just know that these are a resource. And these are actual comments from past panelists. And so some are related to work samples, some related to budget, detail in the timeline. And this is an example of an artist that had a lot of grand ideas and was really ambitious, but then it was a little too much and the application lacked some focus. And this is a great slide to think about when you're developing your narrative. So what's the magic? And then the last point is take the strategy out of the equation, present your best self, and let go of the outcome. So once you submit the application, don't focus on the outcome of whether you're selected or not.
You know, and Karen will go further and say, hit submit and then forget about it.
Okay, so this is some recap of everything that we talked about, but we're just going to keep going. And some things to keep in mind. And frequently asked questions.
So we wanted to touch on this just really briefly. These are some resources that you have available to you for this process or any other process. Alaska State Council on the Arts, some physical resources. Artwork is a resource guide that I've been using for years. A couple websites that would be really helpful for you to have is artbusiness.com, Americans for the Arts, ArtistU, National Young Arts Foundation, and the Sharity Foundation. All of these websites have specific information on this aspect of being an artist. Okay, so now we're going to open it up for questions. We do have a lot of questions that have come in, so we'll just kind of start from the top. I think we may have answered some of these. One question we had was about timeline. Could a project occur any time between that year period, or does it have to be specifically June 1 to May 31st? It can take place any time between those months. It does not need to be stretched up to take the entire year. So it could be a few months long, it could be the whole year, it could be half the year, etc.
So if you have a residency in mind, I would include the months on that, and if you want to include whether you've been accepted to the residency or not, and if you haven't yet, what's your plan B, what's the timeline on that. So just being specific and thoughtful, letting the panel know that you've thought about what you plan to do throughout the year. You can include work samples that you've made in collaboration with others, but you have to be, if you're applying as an individual or as a group, you have to be very specific of what role you played in the roles of others. It has to be really clear about how you contributed to the work.
Yeah, the artist resume, the question was about including other work. Keep it connected to your artist practice.
We don't provide past applications that were successful or provide contact information. You can see all of past award recipients on our website, and if you know them, sure, I would reach out to them, but we aren't able to publicize past applications.
And there are lots of artists that would be happy to share that information with you, but you would have to reach out to them on your own.
Oh, thank you for that resource on the Alaska Heritage Institute. We'll look at that. Yes, and we will be providing a copy of these slides on our website.
A question is there a requirement to keep a blog? No, that is not a requirement.
We do require a final report written as a narrative at the end of the grant period. Looks like there are 4 names.
So the question is to ask what we said about work samples as part of a collaboration. So you can include work samples that you have done in collaboration with someone else, but you need to identify what the collaboration was and what your role was in that collaborative piece. What panelists wouldn't want to see is a collaborative piece that has not been properly credited. So if I had done a piece in collaboration with Sharity, but I had posted an image of it and just included myself in that work, that wouldn't be appropriate. If I identified that Sharity was a co-collaborator in that and what Charity's role was, that would be okay. But this is, if you are applying as an individual, it is based on your individual work and a project that will advance your individual career. So you want to be mindful about the work samples that you're showing to reflect your individual practice.
And this comes up under the folk and traditional arts discipline for totem poles and large installation projects that are often done as a group. And so you just want to be really clear about what you did for that art piece.
Question about if awarded, are artists flown into Anchorage for the May course meeting? Yes. If awarded, all artists who are awarded are flown into Anchorage for the professional development workshops and the award celebration.
And it looks like that is all of the questions we have today. We have a few more minutes. If anyone has any questions, please type those in the chat box. Or if you think of something tonight or tomorrow, you can either call us or utilize arts@rasmussen.org. Arts@rasmussen.org is a great way to get a quick response. So Karen, myself, and Enzina are all reviewing those emails, so we are pretty quick to respond using that email.
The question is if non-award winners purchase the professional development days to attend. Unfortunately, not at this time. We are looking at ways of expanding professional development opportunities to all artists, but right now, that professional development is part of the award. It's not something that can be signed into.
Yes, the reference to the review criteria for emerging, mid-career, mature, I would go back to the guidelines and review those specific definitions that we have. And then, as mentioned, project award is you're able to apply as an emerging artist.
Yeah, and just real quickly, emerging artist is not an artist that's just starting out or is super, super early in their career. It is an artist who is early in their career but has an established foundation in their work, has a portfolio of work, already has experienced whatever's relevant, whether it's exhibition or performance. So an emerging artist is established and rooted in the foundation of their work, but may just be in more of a beginning stage.
With that, I would remember the draft review deadline coming up next Friday, Valentine's Day. You have until 11:59.
We'd love to see your application submitted early.
And we'll review it for completeness of the application. Otherwise, the deadline is March 2nd, 2020. Thank you all for joining us. I hope this was helpful. We appreciate it.
Oh, we just saw another question come in. Is there a requirement to submit a report, a final report if awarded? Yes, upon completion.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.